back to another episode of Undebt Feeded, where we are lifting the lid of debt constraints to live life beyond limits. I'm your host, Bree Franklin. Welcome to 2024. Excited to be in this new year and to continue having these critical conversations about overcoming debt constraint to achieve career success. If you've been tuning in, you've heard us speak to a number of guests from Yaneli Espinal to Erica Young to Tomas Alvarez and many others who are all experts in some form or fashion on coming through treacherous debt in some degree. So student loans, consumer spending, mortgages, you name it. We have been talking quite a bit about what's at stake for people who are battling egregious debt loads themselves. And today's guest is, of course, no exception. So to preface, I had the honor of crossing paths with this individual at FinCon in 2022 and seeing her completely rock the stage. I learned so many critical tips on how to get my mindset right about money, especially as far as defeating student debt. And you're going to hear her talk in a little bit during our interview about what those odds were. So just to share a little bit of a teaser, we have today Bernadette Joy, who is the eighth child in her father's brood of 9 and a first-gen Filipina American. She understands those who feel they missed the money memo. She's the CEO of Crush Your Money Goals, a personal finance training company serving up education with a side of pizzazz. She's featured monthly in Forbes, CNBC, and CNET, and appeared on more than 30 podcasts, radio, and TV shows. Sure, she boasts 2 bachelor's and a master's and a decade of Fortune 100 and startup experience, but her real street cred, paying off a jaw-dropping $300,000 of debt in 3 years and investing her first million in her 30s. Now she works 20 hours a week to focus her financial freedom on joy, K-pop, yoga, karaoke, and spoiling her nieces and nephews as their traveling rich auntie. Her highly anticipated first book, published by Simon & Schuster, is slated to drop in 2024, later this year, in time for the holidays. Today, she shares strategies so simple you pole-fish could understand. She's coached thousands nationwide, sharing her 5-step secret recipe for ditching debt, mastering savings, and investing for financial peace. Without further ado, welcome, Bernadette.
Hello. Thanks so much for having me.
Thank you for joining. Congrats on being our first guest to tape in 2024. We're excited to have you.
Ooh, Happy New Year.
Yes. And again, I said it behind the scenes, love the hair, love the new look, and you
Oh,
are reflecting and exuding living your best debt-free life.
thank you. It's I guess my color is pink. You can't see it right now, but even my dunks today are purple.
I love that. Yes, we love an on-theme woman who's got, like a good look to sport. Like I
Thank
said, you
you.
make me want to be better, so I did my best to spruce up accordingly.
It's actually one of my New Year's resolutions to try to spruce it up every now and then too, because COVID put me into a pajama habit for a couple of years, and I realized that a lot of my clothes have gone unworn. So I have a thing right now where I'm trying to wear all my clothes at least once before I rotate them again.
There you go. Yep, that's a great way to make the most of what you have. And I think that's a learned skill, right?
Absolutely.
Scarcity or just maximizing before trying to do more and move on to the next thing.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Well, let's get into it. So obviously you have so many gems already that pack a punch in your bio, but always great to hear the story straight from the source. And again, you have nothing but respect for me from what you've been able to accomplish. So please walk us through what that debt-free journey was like of shedding close to, or more than $250,000 in student loans.
Yeah. So hello everyone. I am Bernadette Joy. Happy 2024. My debt-free journey really started in 2016 when I was 10 weeks away from graduating from my MBA program. And I decided to do a master's program when I was in what I called my quarter life crisis, when I found myself 2 years earlier in a job that I did not like, in a company I did not want to be in, and really did not see a path in the current career that I was in. And so I really had this thought that said, well, I don't want to become a loser.
Mm.
like that was literally the thought that went in my head. And so what is the solution to this while I'm trying to figure out what I want to do with my life? Oh yeah, you know what would be a good idea? To go back to school, because then it seems like I'm doing something, right? And so I went to get my master's, then found myself 2 years later, still didn't have a clue as to what I was going to do, but now I had $72,000 of student loan debt. Plus, I had all of the normal bills that a young married couple would have. We had just also bought a second house. We had bought a house, a townhouse, and then during that time, I don't know if you remember back in like 2016, like HTV was really big and everyone was flipping houses. And like, I was like, that seems easy because, they're able to flip a house in 20, in like 25 minutes on TV. So how hard could it be? And, ended up having not only $72,000 in student loans, but all of the bills that people normally have, and then having two mortgages, which was really outside of the scope of what my husband and I could afford because I was not working full time then. And so the quarter life crisis led to a bit of a mental health crisis where I was sitting there thinking, how did I get myself into this? Like, how did this come to be? I thought I was doing everything right. I did exactly what my parents told me to do. I went to college. I got 2 degrees, not even just one, 2 degrees. And then I got a master's degree. And why is it that I feel not only unsuccessful, but feel incredibly like I felt like a weight was like sitting on my chest. Like at times I felt like I literally couldn't breathe. And I'll never forget it. It was in the middle of, it was actually like in January. And I was on my office floor, just like crying, thinking like, I don't know how I'm gonna get out of this. And uh, long story short, I went over to my husband who was sitting somewhere else in the house. And I said, I think I really messed up because I had no idea that I had actually taken out $72,000 of student loan debt. Like, I don't know if anyone else has had this experience, but you sign up for college or you sign up for a master's degree or whatever, but no one tells you exactly how much it's going to cost
Right.
when it all comes together. And I had been working part-time and I'd been paying amounts all through the 2 years that I was in my master's program. So I was thinking in my head that I must have paid more than what it really amounted to. When I go back in hindsight and did the math, the degree was like $120,000, and I had not really added that up when I had done that. And so I went over to my husband. I said, I really think I messed this up. I had no idea. And I was really stressed about it. And his response, which was super interesting, was like, what are you worried about? Like, all of our friends have debt. Like, everyone we know like has the same thing. Everyone else like seems to be living it. Like, why is this like why is this such a big deal? Like, you made good money before, you'll probably make good money again. Like, it'll be fine. And I was just like, will it though? Will it be fine?
Right. Like, I don't know
And
about that.
I was like, I don't think so, sir, because all of the people that I knew at the time were still paying off tons of student loan debt. Like, and that was like, 10 years after we had graduated, plus, everyone I knew was like incredibly stressed, worked really long hours, like also didn't have time for life. And so I was like, you know what? I don't want to go down that path. And so I started as any smart millennial would do. I went to Google and I Googled how to pay off student loans and just kept Googling. And fortunately or unfortunately, back then, um, the one person that kept showing up was a guy that I'm sure everyone is familiar with, Dave Ramsey, who just had a ton of ads, right?
Hmm.
Just like was the first thing to show up on Google. And I was like, I don't really like this guy's tone and I don't really like, like how he's saying things, but this is the best that I can find right now. And so I started doing the debt snowball and trying to pay off student loans one at a time. And I'm sure we'll get more into it, but by end of 2016, so 9 months after that mental health crisis, all $72,000 were paid off. And my husband and I had to take a lot of steps in order to do that, which I'm sure we'll talk more about. But that was really the start of the debt-free journey. And then I thought, I thought that it would take me another 10 years to pay off my student loans. Like I started to open up the possibility that, I might not have to live in debt for the rest of my life. And that's really what opened me up to start thinking about paying off mortgages and paying for cars in full and actually thinking about financial independence and not just becoming debt free.
Yes. And I love that this is just the first step in many, because I think that a lot of people, it's so all consuming that that becomes the goal. Like there's
Mm-hmm.
the Ramsey Camp put out a documentary. I don't know if you're familiar with it, called Borrowed Future. And
Mm-hmm.
it ran surveys, and it was polling people who had graduated with student loan debt. And it was asking them, like, what are your big aspirations? And it used to be some variety of getting a car, getting a home, starting a family, traveling. And now so often it's just getting debt free.
Mm-hmm.
So as we're talking on this, honestly, I feel like that is actually the angle that I would love to explore
Mm-hmm.
in terms of, the episode theme. So beyond even breaking or break even, right? Like being able to just, that's the first step in the lifelong journey of building and establishing generational wealth, because so many people, like you just spoke so perfectly on, it's a mindset, and it feels like the world is closing in on you, and it feels like this is the reality that you've been dealt, and there is no life beyond or on the other side of debt. And so I would love to hear more on what got you to thinking bigger, and like when you were able to really start to envision a life where this wasn't following you around, because I'm admittedly still in the trenches myself, and it
Mm-hmm.
has real psychological effects on my physical health. Like it gets really, really depressing, for lack of a better
Mm-hmm.
word. So how were you able to employ a mindset that helped you stay the course, especially, when, as you just described, like in the context of your marriage, your partner, he was seemingly pretty undaunted and is like, what's the big deal? Everyone's dealing with it. So how, when was your like, I'm going to be different moment?
Yeah, yeah. Well, when you said for lack of a better word on depressing, I actually think that is the right word, right? In that there's not enough conversation about how debt can lead to depression. And, for a bit, I was in that depression myself, in that, not only was I, had this ton of student loan debt, but I really did not know what I was going to do even for a living. Like, I didn't even have a job that I was really like in at the moment. So, like I think that's a very real thing that more people need to talk about. And I would love to tell you that I had some like grand vision for my life, or that this was a really calculated move, but it was really more of me sitting in this, like I said, this I could almost physically feel like the heaviness in my chest.
Yeah.
The way I would best describe it, I also like I happen to have asthma, and so it kind of felt like I was having like a very like low key, slow burning asthma attack all the time. Like I felt like my breath was literally
Powerful.
so short, right? And I was just like, this sounds very dramatic, but I was like, I might die if I keep if I keep feeling like this. Like this doesn't feel like sustainable. And so, my thought was, the worst case scenario is I'm going to end up continuing to be in debt. So why not at least try? Like try something crazy and see if it works, because the worst case scenario is I'll be exactly where I am right now. And the trigger point was when I actually dove into the fine print of the student loans that I did not realize that I had signed off on. I learned that, they were capitalizing, they were growing interest every day. Like
Yes.
and a lot of people don't understand that. And I literally thought like, oh, when you're in school, like you don't owe anything until you graduate. And for some reason that I also equated that to thinking, well, it's not going to grow while I'm in school, but it grows literally the day it, like, you take out that loan, it starts growing. And I remember the rate was something like four something, like $4 and something cents, like, the cost of like actually not even a Starbucks anymore. That's probably too low for a Starbucks, but
Right. In this day and age.
yeah, but I guess back then it could have been, but for something, and I was thinking like per day, I'm not even getting the Starbucks coffee. Like this sounds ridiculous. And so
Mm.
I was just like, I don't want to do that. And I said to my husband, very specifically, I said, that's fine for everybody else. It's not good enough for me. Like I I don't think that we have to be like everybody else. And
Sure.
like I think part of it for me particularly is that I do think a part of it is I have been somewhat of a rebellious person my entire life, especially like relatively to like the Asian American community, where it's just like you very much fall into the collective societal expectation that you should do what everyone else does. Like everyone else is a doctor or a lawyer or an accountant or whatever, so you should do that too. But I've always wanted to do something a little bit different, and this just happened to work in my favor. That the little bit different was I don't want to be in debt the rest of my life. And then specifically to your question of, what really got me moving on it was that snowball idea of like start somewhere that I can feel like I'm making progress. And for me, even though mathematically I understood like interest rates and cliche, I am Asian and I am actually good at math. And so like I understood like, okay, theoretically I should be paying higher interest. Oh, I got so worked up. Take a
Yes. Breathe and reset.
let me breathe and reset here. That I should be paying the higher interest mathematically, but psychologically, the debt snowball for me was way more doable, way more doable. And that's what I tell a lot of people though too, is like sometimes the math doesn't math like it might not math psychologically for you, but if you feel like you can continue longer and you continue doing that progress, you're more likely to pay it off.
Definitely. It is psychological because Dave was my first foray into debt freedom as well. And my rock bottom moment was summer 2019. I let my debt go so far behind the eight ball that it tanked my credit overnight. And then it spilled over to my co-signers and, which were close relatives. And that was exceedingly brutal. But he was such a great foundation for just resetting, and the snowball, it works wonders because it went from me feeling like, what is the point in trying? Because I kept saying it feels like trying to deplete the ocean with a teaspoon, to, oh my gosh, I have a real shot at this, because now that's $400 gone, that's $900 gone, 1,500. And so it is so much more than just the math, it's the mental. I love that you're speaking so openly on that. And just, I want to take a moment for those who watch this when we drop it. Please know that it is a daunting journey. Like, I am definitely not going to downplay it like some people try to, and say, oh, it's all in your head, because like Bernadette just described, it does have psychosomatic impacts, on your health. I wake up with that same sense of dread, and there'll be moments that are especially low where I'm like, I've thought that same thing of, I might lose my life behind this. It feels, I don't have asthma, but that slow burn of just, restricting your lungs and just squelching all of the vibrance and the gumption out of life, that's real. But all hope is not lost. And so I'm glad that, Bernadette is able to share an actual success story, and it's not hypothetical, it's not just speculation. Like, these are things that have worked in her case. And so I really, am just delighted to be able to share with people, like practical everyday people, no one who had some cushy head start or, a windfall just materialized in their lap. Like, you really had to roll up your sleeves and work your tail off to get through that. So just practically, can you share a little bit about, maybe changing course and what that entailed for you to accumulate the capital to pay those loans off?
Yeah. So, while I was in this MBA program, my I had initially started with quitting my day job, my corporate day job, and in order to accommodate the program, I took on a part-time job in a fashion boutique for like $12 an hour, right? So, like, imagine, and at the time I was in my late 20s. And so I was one of the youngest people in my MBA program. And I was in a program with a bunch of like CFOs, like chief marketing officers and stuff. And I'm like, hi, I'm 20 something and I work at a fashion boutique. Like, I didn't know what I was doing there. So there was definitely like a feeling of, inferiority to some regard. And one of the biggest things in terms of really starting to think about how to pay this off was like, stop paying attention and stop comparing to what everyone else is doing and focus on like what you have available, like what's within your kind of center of control. And so that it was then that I decided to go back and work for a guy who had actually recruited me into my last job. And he had we had always had a good rapport. And he found that I was in my MBA program. He said, hey, would you want to work for me as a recruiter, to be able to, you can still go to school, we can be flexible, all that stuff, but we could really use your expertise. And I said, you know what, that'd be great. And it was, the starting salary for that was $30,000, which was a lot less than what I was hoping to make coming out of an MBA program, but it had an upside of being able to earn commissions. And I had never been in a sales type of role. And so it was very, very new to me to do that. But I have to say that was probably one of the best decisions I've made in deciding to make this really big career pivot for a salary that was lower than what I had started out with out of college, to learn these different skills. So I learned a lot about how to prospect. I learned about negotiation skills. I learned how to not be so self-conscious talking to, senior leaders. You have to be very good at time management and prioritization when you're trying to make sales versus getting like a regular steady paycheck.
Mhm.
And so anytime I got a commission check, it would go straight to my student loans. Like it would just, I would put it there first. And aside from doing those type of hustles and really starting to think outside of what my career corporate skills were. I also at that time started to get the kind of entrepreneurship bug. And one of my MBA projects was to was a idea I had of like basically a local version of Rent the Runway, where it would be like an in-person shop that women could like rent out dresses. And it was at the time of my life where I was a bridesmaid like 6 times. And if anyone can relate to that plight, right? Of like how expensive it is to be a bridesmaid, right? And so I was just like, oh my gosh, if I have
Wait,
to,
is
yeah.
this Lane London by chance?
No, it wasn't. It's
Oh,
a different company. It was based out of Charlotte. It was
oh, okay. Because I'm
uh,
familiar with a similar one out of Atlanta. I was like, what are the chances she's talking about the same one? Okay, carry on.
yeah. I want to say they started around a similar time though too, but and so I started doing a side hustle, get this, like out of my house, renting out dresses to women who had the same plight as me, which was like, I don't want to keep buying dresses for the engagement and the rehearsal party and the bachelorette party and all this stuff. And so it actually started turning into a little bit of a thing in Charlotte. And so that was extra money that was going towards student loans and stuff also. But it was, again, also teaching me like starting to build confidence in me that like, okay, maybe I didn't make a mistake in doing this program. Maybe I did learn some really good skills that I can apply immediately. And so I would love to tell you that you can get out of student loans with just like hopes and dreams, but there was a lot of hustle involved during that time. So if you think about that, all of the stuff that I was doing, plus my husband at the time, who was working a day job, he was so supportive, and he started taking on some side things too. One of my favorite side hustles that he had was back then in Charlotte, there was a lot of like film and TV that was being shot in Charlotte. And so he would be an extra for shows like Homeland and like
So
HBO shows.
cool.
And it didn't pay a lot, but he was like, I would have been here for like, you could pay me to be like 3 rows behind Claire Danes. Like I would so do that. And so he would take that extra money and put it towards loans as well. And so between the two of us, we hustled in a lot of kind of creative things, but also like things that we actually enjoyed and things that we were interested in doing. And then a lot of the usual stuff that you hear kind of from Dave Ramsey camp, like we cut a lot of expenses during that time. The one of the biggest shifts that we made was we went down from 2 cars to one, which is like kind of
Mhm.
unheard of in Charlotte, because Charlotte is not a commutable city at
Much like
all.
Atlanta. Yes.
Yeah, like public transportation is terrible in Charlotte, and everyone was just like, y'all are crazy. Like, why would you have one car? Funny enough, like now, almost 8 years later, we still have only one car. We thought it was just going to be a temporary thing, but we got so used to it that has saved us like tens of thousands of dollars, I think, at this point.
Amazing. And that's hilarious because having just been in Atlanta for the holidays, my dad and stepmom, same boat. Her car was totaled in an accident and the other person was at fault. So she got a handsome payout check. And initially, right, the thought was, yeah, I'm going to just turn around and get a replacement. But almost a year later, they're still making it work with one. So it's just funny how sometimes getting really like scrappy can actually turn out to be a new direction to take life in. And you're like, just enjoying the savings and the money that would have been going towards that can now be redirected elsewhere.
Yeah.
And you're like just hearing how you talk about that, like y'all are the very textbook definition of true teamwork in a marriage, like marriage goals in so many ways as I set my sights on entering that next season, hopefully not too terribly long from now I think, that gets lost in our generation. Everyone can be
Hmm.
like very just about self, but it's
Hmm.
like you were hustling because you were building y'all's future. Your husband, he sacrificed, he busted his tail for y'all. And I think that's a beautiful story. And I appreciate you sharing that.
Thank you. And like I feel very lucky in that, there's a lot of personal finance folks that say that, the best investment that you can make is who you decide to like partner your life with. And I really do think that was a really pivotal piece in my personal journey. But I also have seen a lot of couples who have let debt kind of come in between them, right? In terms of like, oh, I've seen couples where it's like, oh, that's your student loan, so like you deal with it. And
And
he and I
married,
and married, yeah,
a
yeah, I
couple
have
of things
seen,
like that. Wow.
yeah, I've seen a lot of situations like that as a financial coach. And like AJ and I were both also very big board game fanatics and very competitive, and so we kind of looked at this, in a way of like, okay, this is kind of like a real life board game. This is kind of like real life, like the game. If you ever have played that game where you actually have to like try to be successful, and part of what was fun, if you can call it fun, was trying to get really creative in how we could accelerate our speed on this. And so initially, when I had thought about paying off the student loans, mathematically, I was like, okay, I got $72,000 of student loans. So let me work backwards. Let me reverse engineer this. So I had a really aggressive goal at the time of um, doing it in 2 years, which my husband was like, you're insane. Like people pay this off in like 10 years. How would you even do this in 2 years? You have like a real job right now. And I was just like, well, mathematically, $72,000 divided by 2 years is $36,000 a year. Okay, that's more than what my paycheck is. Fine. $36,000 divided by 12 months is $3,000 per month. Okay, that still feels very overwhelming, still feels tight in my chest. Let me keep reversing back. So $3,000 divided by 4 weeks is $750 a week. That's a little more than $100 a day. And so I had to like sit with myself and say, Bernadette, are you smart enough to figure out $100 a day in any shape or form? Like any shape or form. It doesn't have to be for my day job. It could be, selling 2 more dress rentals. It could be, doing one stint at the TV show. Like, how can I come up with $100 a day, even if I don't do it every day? That will still be
Mm.
closer than doing nothing at all. And that's really where we got the ball moving on the snowball. I was like, okay, what can we do today for $100? Like, let's go sell something. Let's go like do a little thing here. Let me see if I can call that client one more time and like see if I can close that deal. And that mentality is what a lot of people have credited when they come through my financial coaching to say like, wow, when I look at my student loans, it's such a huge number, but if we reverse it back to what is actually doable per day, a lot of people start to feel like that's where they can make progress.
That is so eloquently put. $100 a day, like make it bite size. They say to eat an elephant, it's one bite at a time. And I think it's the student debt is very much a behemoth of a similar nature. I've heard people with as much as 750,000, right? Like from med school degrees. And it's like just off impulse as humans, we're like, you just think to weep because you're like, how in the world am I going to dig out of a hole that size, earning a modest or maybe even undercompensated salary, right? So just the ingenuity, you've got to get creative sometimes. And it is certainly inconvenient and it can be a huge blow to pride and to ego. But I mean, wouldn't you say it's worth it, right? Once you can get to the other side. And I guess because I'm looking at time, I can't believe we've not been going wrong. And I know you've got so many things on your plate and
Yeah.
great cuts to get back to. But because I have heard some people who counter like the philosophy I have of, working aggressively to get out of debt and get people out of debt through the work that the Prosperity Project does. Someone I met at a conference, he, very well meaning, and it definitely wasn't like he was trying to condemn getting out of debt to build wealth. But he's like, oh, well, my motto is let your assets make enough so that you can pay off your debt. And I'm thinking, but what about the people who are just so ill positioned, right, to be able to build assets because they are 6 months past due and their debt to income ratio is in the triple digits and they just are completely out of options. So I guess just to really like respond to that, when you
Mm.
say that it's that kind of one has to come before the other or should? Like, I'm curious to hear your take. This is not me trying
Yeah,
to rag on
yeah.
anybody.
I love that we're having this conversation about it because I'll tell you this. So one of my best friends from college, he's like that guy, right? He's like all about like leveraging real estate and blah 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 blah. And when I paid off my house, he's like, "Why would you do that? Like, why would you do that?" And then yet here I am, retired at 39, and have 1.5 million dollars saved up for retirement, and he's not there yet. So um,
Laughing there.
and no shade to him, right? It's just it's two different approaches. And the way that I look at it is it really comes down to risk tolerance. And risk tolerance is so so influenced by so many factors. And I would also say, like there, whether or not people want to, acknowledge it, there's a different challenge, particularly for women of color, to be able to take on that kind of risk.
Yes,
So, like what I've told people is that the philosophy that I have is that debt is meant to be a short-term solution, not a long-term lifestyle. And that is really a philosophy that I follow, where once I put into my mind that, like, yes, if you have debt, by the way, if you're someone who has debt and you're feeling like shamed by it, or you're feeling like you're not doing the right thing, like I like to tell people all the time, like if you have in mind that you meant for it to be paid off at some point, right, then it's meant to be a short-term solution. But I think a lot of us have been overwhelmed and to start believing that like the only way to get through life is if you leverage, and that's just not true. Like, so for me, in particular, and why I would counter that point for a lot of people, is that when you take on debt, you also create more risk in your life.
you do.
And so for someone to say, well, just let your assets, do the work until you can pay your debt off. What I found with a lot of clients who I work with, who are in their 50s or 60s, who took that philosophy on, like, are not able to pay off the debt. They have now been living with it for 10, 20, 30 years, and they've become so accustomed to it that then it makes it very difficult for me to actually teach them how to do investing, because they can imagine what life would look like without the debt. And so for someone who is thinking about becoming financially independent, meaning that you don't have to worry about creditors coming after you at any point in the game, right? Then, like, going debt free is actually a very great strategy for someone to build their risk tolerance so that they can take on bigger risks in the long term. So take for me as an example, like I consider myself to be highly conservative when it comes to investing. Like right now, like I can tell you, like I have a lot of money stashed in cash right now, because right now you can get 5% for basically no risk in cash. And a lot of people are like, well, you could earn 10,
Like in
whatever
a high yield
percent.
savings.
I have high yield savings, I have CDs, I have money market accounts, I have I bonds, I have like a lot of stuff, treasury bills, a lot of stuff that are basically cash or cash equivalents, right?
Mhm.
And a lot of people are like, well, you're so dumb because you could make X amount in the real estate market, you could make X amount in the stock market, but those are not guaranteed. And and for me, like my situation is different. People will look at me and say, well, you're young, like you can take on more risk. But I'm like, but I'm retired. I'm not trying to go back to work if I can if I can help it. You heard it in my bio. I work 20 hours a week right now. I'm
Yeah.
good with that. Right. So what I would recommend to people when you hear that kind of stuff is to say, well, what is the amount of risk that I'm willing to take into my life, right? That again, that I can go to sleep with at night. And
Mm.
for me, like even mortgage, like a mortgage, which is not considered to be like a quote unquote bad debt, like still felt like risk to me, because think about in the pandemic in 2020, in when March 2020, I remember very specifically saying to my husband, holy smokes, like we have no idea what the world is going to turn into. And I had learned about the pandemic even before it hit the US, because my uncle passed away from COVID in like early February in the Philippines. And I was like, it's coming here. And like people were like totally downplaying it, all this stuff, right? And then so long story short, I said, people are like, this is gonna be crazy. And both of us looked at ourselves and we said, you know what, worst comes to worst, like we'll go work at Walmart as greeters because we have no mortgage, right? Like
Yeah.
we are completely debt free. Like
Not
our
bound.
living expenses are so low right now, when at that time, if you remember, a lot of people were starting to take out forgiveness loans, trying to take out, like, trying to ask for forbearance, like all of this other stuff. And we didn't have to worry about this stuff. And that was probably the leg up that I had on people to build assets, which now brought me to over $1 million.
And that's the way to do it. Like, I think you have to have strategy. And what you just spoke to is knowing your values. And like when you said, like, I'm good with that, people will project onto you what they see is best fit and what they would do in your shoes. And just knowing when to eat the meat and throw away the bones. I feel like that's my Breeism for this episode, which is not original. I've heard that elsewhere too, but I think that applies here. The takeaway, eat the meat, throw away the bones, and just don't be afraid to double down on your values because no one has had to live this battle in your specific case with your specific challenges, disadvantages, things that held you back, right? That were inequitable. So I mean, just you are a shining example. And like I said, in every way, encourage and inspire me to want to be better. I'm now about to approach my 30s, so that'll happen for me next spring. And
Oh,
I am hopeful that my 20s were the season of learning so that my 30s can be the season of earning and, finally walking away from debt and being able to bank my first million like you've been successful in so that I can pay that forward. And, you leave some very impressive shoes to follow in. So just again, congratulations and shout out to you for everything it is that you've worked so hard to build and set up and all the people that you've inspired and including me in the process.
well, I am so grateful that you had me, and I'm looking forward to following your journey as well. And I will tell you, as someone who is going to be entering my 40s next year, my 30s was like the best of my, like the best of my life, and I know the best is yet to come. But I think this is when you actually get to learn who you really are and align those values.
Yes, I look forward to it with open arms. A lot of people are like freaked out because they can see the end of 20s and I'm like, bring it on. Like I'm ready to kind of level up in that way. And I feel like just step it up a notch in terms of sophistication and carry myself like I know what I'm doing.
That's
Probably
right.
won't get it right always still, but it's a start.
Here's a secret: none of us know what we're actually doing. We're all just floating around. So don't be fooled by all the people that think like that make it seem like they know what they're doing. People always tell me it's like, oh, you seem like you're put together. I'm like, I don't know what I'm doing. I'm playing it by ear too.
We're all doing the best we can. That's right. Well, thank you again, Bernadette. This is a wonderful conversation. Thanks again for setting us off strong for this new year. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in, whether you watch it this week when it drops or sometime after we've gone live. Please weigh in with your feedback, and we'll look forward to having more episodes for you coming up very soon.